ChessDiagnostic.
Hello everybody, welcome to ChessDiagnostic. I'm kind of making a joke today with my thumbnail, just asking if Wei Yi is the first chess artificial intelligence robot, but it seems like looking at his games, they're just absolutely perfect. How he's playing is brilliant and genius, really. It's so simple, but he seems to be beating all these incredibly strong players just by very simple means. Of course, it looks simple, but it's really not. But it really boils down to activity when we look at this game here. This is a game between Wei Yi as black and Vladimir Malakhov, who's a 27-22. Now, Wei Yi is the youngest 2700 player, or the youngest player to ever reach 2700, even quicker than Magnus Carlsen. And when he was playing against 2600 grandmasters, he was destroying them with tactical blows. And now he's destroying all these 2700 players in the endgame, and of course with tactics as well. But he's really just outplaying almost all these people he's playing. And when we can see what he's doing, it's a combination of opening preparation, tactical brilliance, but really just understanding the heart of the game better and capitalizing on it. So this is an English opening. Nothing real special here, just normal development of the pieces, contesting the center. And we can see that white and black are just going through normal development, pinning the knight, developing the bishop. They both castle. So then after d4 and a trade, Malakhov wants to take with the piece to take advantage of this weak pawn here. And that's a standard idea in the English opening for white. But there's a new idea that Wei Yi comes up with, which is an exchange sacrifice that he kind of tricks his opponent. His opponent didn't have to do it, but he tricks his opponent in to going for with bishop to c7. And of course, this basic tactic of just taking doesn't work because then there's a double attack of mate and on the knight. But after he moves the bishop back, he actually invites this exchange for the bishop on this rook. Of course, he was threatening mate, so he prevents it. But after bishop to b6, now this is where his understanding of activity comes in. So white is relatively undeveloped with these pieces here. And what happens is he's trading his dark square bishop, which is one of his few active pieces that would have controlled this diagonal and put pressure on the entire length of that diagonal, as well as helping to attack this pawn. And he trades it for a relatively inactive piece of black's. And now at the end of this trade, you can see that there's pressure. For example, he can't take the knight because then he would get the exchange back with, I guess it's relatively equal, and he could have done that, but it's definitely a little bit worse for white. And so he gives up a pawn on d4. Now, of course, you can't take with the bishop because then there's this tactic, hitting the queen and winning a piece back for white. So he takes on d4, and Wei Yi immediately goes into an endgame. So it seems a little crazy that this happened in the first place. First, he decides to give up an exchange, and then he decides to go into an endgame with a weaker pawn and an exchange down. So why would he do that? Well, this is very subtle, but it has everything to do with activity. Here we are with these white pieces that are a little bit discoordinated, and this rook is a little bit discoordinated. Now, even though the computer is rating it as equal, it's actually much harder for white to play in this position because black has the two bishops and he's going to have all the threats. So let's see what happens here. immediately attacking that f2 pawn, Malakhov decides to go for his own activity, taking the weak d5 pawn. And now the trade-off is that Wei Yi just got rid of his only weakness, and now he has all the activity for his attack. There are some mistakes by Malakhov in this game, of course, otherwise Wei Yi wouldn't have won, but I'm just making a point that it's a difficult position for a human to play, because the discoordination of White's pieces is making it very hard for him to do anything constructive. And when a human can't find a plan in a position and he just has to keep it together, it's a lot harder than having an active attack. So Malakhov brings his rook over, hitting this h pawn, but he just plays h6. And now, after a couple knight moves, and knight to f5, this rook is trapped. So he's completely reduced the activity of the rook. Now this rook would like to get in, but it's just one move too late. Alright, so he doesn't trade because he doesn't want a bishop against this knight, which would be a disadvantage, so he tries to keep his own bishop. Malakhov does. But now Wei Yi starts increasing his activity, bringing all his pieces in. And though it's about equal at this point, Wei Yi starts gaining the advantage with his two bishops and putting an attack on these two pawns. So White's still a little discoordinated, but he still could have held it together. He does take the pawn, but again, Wei Yi gave up material for increased activity. Now he starts putting pressure with bishop c7 on the g3 pawn. And so we get some waiting moves in this ending because Wei Yi doesn't find the exact right plan right away. He takes his time, and they just kind of shuffle pieces back and forth. So eventually, after shuffling these pieces back and forth, it was probably because of a time control, he finds the right idea with f5, undermining this g3 pawn because this knight doesn't really have anywhere to go. Alright, so now f4. And now, of course, if the rook takes here, then we just have Wei Yi taking the knight, and then eventually checking, winning this pawn, and he'll just have a huge advantage because of all his past pawns. So Malakhov doesn't allow that. But at this point, you can see Wei Yi's greater activity is a huge advantage, and especially with the two bishops, his rook is surrounding White's king as well as the pawns. Eventually, he succumbs to tactics here. And now, for example, if Malakhov took the piece, then we'd actually have bishop to f1. And it's just a bloodbath at this point because of all the pawns. There's really no good move. So of course he doesn't go for that line, or he doesn't take here, because it's actually a mate in 2, if you want to calculate this, with a discovered check. So after just a few more moves, at this point, Malakhov resigned. Because, for example, if he tries to protect that knight, then we still get bishop to f1, the knight has to take, and he's just won too much material. So this was definitely an incredible game that I was analyzing, a very modern masterpiece with some brilliant opening preparation that centered all around increasing your activity and at the expense of material, which is a very hard thing to learn. Exchange sacrifices, when should you give them material, and how to evaluate activity. What I've noticed with Wei Yi's games is he has a perfect ability to evaluate if his activity will be greater than his opponent's. And I think that's the thing that can make you the strongest at chess. If you can figure out whether you have 2 knights or versus a rook or however much material you have, if you're able to evaluate your position as more active, you will win the game. I just wanted to make that point analyzing this game, as well as wondering if Wei Yi is the first chess AI who might become world champion. Then thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the future. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for future videos. See you in the future.